Chiefs fans, this is the Sports Radio 810 WHB Postgame Show.
The Chiefs have won! The Chiefs have won Super Bowl 57!
If you want Chiefs, follow the leader. Sports Radio 810 WHB.
Yeah, tough one to swallow tonight. There will be no three-peat. There will be no sunshine and rainbows to talk about in tonight's show. The final edition of the season of the Red and Gold Postgame Show, brought to you by Boda Wine. Kick your tailgate party up a notch this football season with Boda, the ultimate tailgate wine. Boda, this is how we Boda. Please drink responsibly. Sponsored by Boda Vineyards, Manteca, California. There doesn't really need to be this overarching theme of the post-game show tonight, the Red and Gold post-game show, I should say. There were many areas tonight where the Chiefs didn't just struggle, they catastrophically failed. I mean, this was, by all accounts, history in the making tonight. You know, wherever you were watching, maybe your house, maybe at a friend's, maybe you were at a bar, wherever you were, you had some idea in your mind why the Chiefs were going to be able to have that three-peat, why they were going to be able to get it done. I think the most common phrase I heard the majority of this week, and I even uttered it as well, you just don't bet against Patrick Mahomes, not in the postseason. He's too successful. I mean, you could give me very good arguments as to why Philly was the better team. They were loaded defensively. They had the best running back in football. They had dominated in the postseason. They had just hung 55 in the NFC title game. Like, you could have given me all of those points. And going into the game tonight, I would have said, I'm sorry, I'm not betting against Patrick Mahomes. But sometimes in sports and sometimes in football, there will be that game that leaves you with your jaw on the floor. And tonight, for me, this was one of those times. I mean, Philly absolutely bludgeoned Kansas City. That game was never close. I know the Chiefs had the ball down 7-0, and they even had the ball when it was 0-0. They'd gotten the ball back after there was the OPI on fourth down by A.J. Brown. But at no point did it feel like the Chiefs were truly in that game. They didn't cross midfield in the first half. They didn't have 30 yards of offense in the first half. Everything about this performance, really with the exception of Xavier Worthy, who had 2 touchdowns, the only 2 touchdowns for, actually, I think it was DeAndre Hopkins had the third one, so I was about to say the only wide receiver to get a touchdown for the Chiefs in this game, but DeAndre Hopkins had a garbage time touchdown, and really, they were all garbage time touchdowns for Kansas City because they were down 34-0 at one point. I've thought about it, and really leading up to this show, because as we were prepping, Dylan here, Kyle at the studio, myself, I was starting to contemplate, was this worse than Tampa Bay? Was this worse than just getting torched by Tom Brady in the COVID year? Because keep in mind, that Chiefs team was unbelievably good in the regular season. They were 14-2, if I'm not mistaken, and they were 14-1 going into the final game of the regular season where they rested their starters. They had beaten Cleveland in the divisional round. They had smoked Buffalo in the AFC title game. And Tampa Bay, they were a wild card team, I believe. They had to go on the road to Washington. They had to beat Green Bay at Lambeau Field in the NFC title game. And going into the matchup that night, in that particular Super Bowl, I thought, this feels like a really good matchup for Kansas City. It really did. But that was a game that left me with my jaw on the floor because Tom Brady and the Bucs destroyed the Chiefs 31-9. And the reason both these games are very comparable, I think for an obvious reason, is that the offensive line got shredded. They were shredded from the first quarter on. But even in that COVID game, the COVID year, I should say, it was all backups. I mean, not every member on that offensive line was a true backup. Some of those guys had gotten starting reps for a handful of weeks, but it was a weakened offensive line. Tonight, that group had been playing together for a long time. And I know Joe Thuney is not the typical left tackle, but you had Caliendo, who had been out there for a handful of weeks. Creed Humphrey had been out there all season long. Trey Smith, Jawan Taylor. And Patrick Mahomes did not have a lot of time. And it's not like Philly was bringing the all-out blitz every single snap. They didn't blitz once in the first half, and their pressure rate was nearly 50%, I believe was the actual total. In fact, I think at one point it was slightly over 50%. I will say this, though, about tonight's offense and putting themselves in a 34-0 hole. There were some really bad reps by the offensive line. There were also some other times, as much as it does pain me to say it, that Patrick Mahomes didn't really see somebody open. He ran into a sack. It was just bad all the way around. There wasn't one drive, really, that felt like something was going to get going. Even coming out of halftime, when the Chiefs were down 24-0, they picked up a first down, but nothing about that series felt positive. Because right after they picked up their second first down of the game, they get sacked on back-to-back plays. And then there's the fourth down where there's a pass that's knocked down. There was a moment where Justin Watson was wide open over the middle of the field. Mahomes didn't see him, and it results in a batted down pass. It got to a point in this game where there was no trust. There was no faith in the offensive line. And maybe Andy Reid and Matt Nagy and Andy Heck thought we could go with DJ Humphries. Maybe we move Joe Thuney back to left guard, see if it sparks something. But it's also a really risky move at a certain point in the game. Now, I'm not going to fight you. When it's 24-0, what do you have to lose at that point? I even thought the mentality should have been, hey, coming out of halftime, if we have a fourth down situation and it's inside of 10 yards, we got to go for it. We just do. There's not enough time left for us to mount a 24-point comeback. We would need to score within 4 minutes. We would need a 3-and-out. We would need a turnover, something like that. But credit where credit's due, you tip your hat. As much as it pains you to do it, sometimes a team just kicks your ass, and that's what the Eagles did tonight. I'm not going to sit here and say, the Chiefs just played absolutely poorly and you can't give any credit to Philadelphia because the Chiefs were so bad. The Eagles made the Chiefs play poorly. We hear that phrase a lot with coaches. The goal is to make your opponent play poorly. And the Eagles were very, very good at doing that. That defense was ready to go. They had a lot of great disguised things. They were winning their one-on-one battles. And I think if you are still boiling about tonight's Super Bowl loss 40-22 at the hands of the Philadelphia Eagles, I think if you're still boiling, what didn't help me was knowing that Saquon Barkley was bottled up tonight. The Chiefs' run defense was great. Absolutely great. Jalen Hurts was not as good as he was in the first Super Bowl. The thing with this game was that the Chiefs' offense never got going, and they gave the Eagles some short field situations. Oh, and by the way, there was a pick six. And there was an interception that set Philly up in the red zone right before half. Those moments, at times, you just can't overcome it. And I think we saw it. Now, Patrick Mahomes goes to 3-2 in Super Bowls in his career. Kansas City falls short of that unprecedented three-peat. We also have to acknowledge, and I'm not trying to make excuses, we also have to acknowledge the difficulty in that. The Chiefs had technically, and not technically, they had already achieved history. No team going for a three-peat had ever gotten to the Super Bowl for that opportunity. The furthest any other team had gotten was the championship or the conference championship game. Nobody had gotten to the Super Bowl. So the Chiefs had gotten further than anybody else. I don't think it takes the sting out of tonight. I'm not trying to give you that. But I will say that at times when you're trying to comprehend a loss like this, it's not that you need to sit down and overanalyze every little thing. Believe me, I'll do that. Dylan will do that. A lot of the people you listen to on this radio station will do that. Sometimes in this sport, though, you just get crushed. And it's odd because this Chiefs team just doesn't do that. Patrick Mahomes does not get blown out. And that was that feel you had going into the game. Hey, if they lose, they're losing late in the fourth quarter. They're losing by 3. They're losing by 1. That was your mentality. Never in your wildest dreams could you have imagined the Chiefs trailing 40-6 in a football game. Not even just the Super Bowl. Any point, exhibition, preseason football, regular season, playoffs, you never could have imagined they would lose a football game 40-6 or give up 40 points before 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter. None of it made sense. But when you're trying to rack your brain about how it happened, you just look at how Philadelphia dominated this game on the defensive side of things. Patrick Mahomes never looked comfortable in this game. It was ugly. It was really, really ugly to watch. You just felt like watching that game like it was nails on a chalkboard. It just made you cringe a little bit. How ugly it was. How difficult everything for that offense it had to go through. Everything just felt out of sync. Felt like they were going upstream. Nothing was flowing naturally. I even had to chuckle a little bit at dark humor, if you will, that the first offensive play that the Chiefs had in this game was a first down, 11-yard play to Juju Smith-Schuster. Then there was a point in time with less than 2 minutes to go, maybe it was like 3 or 4 in the second quarter, the Chiefs had 14 yards of offense. So you think about that. 11 yards on the first play. You're going just like the start against Buffalo. Little quick slant route. Juju Smith-Schuster makes a play. You're moving the football. Let's see what happens. And nothing, and I mean nothing, came after that. And the Eagles just continued to pile onto that lead. And the score, when it's all said and done, for those that went to bed early, or maybe didn't even watch the game, I don't know how it'd be possible if you are a football fan, but you wake up the next morning and you see 40-22, I don't really think the score does it justice. I mean, there were garbage time points for the Chiefs. And I guess you credit them for not completely throwing in the towel. They didn't go down and just get humiliated 50-0. But they got their ass kicked. And I think the Eagles were just fine with those garbage time points, because when you're playing in the Super Bowl, if you're up 50-0, it feels like, and somebody puts up 20, hey, we don't care what the final score is, we won. And I know the Chiefs were able to get some momentum late in that game. They finally were moving the football. Patrick Mahomes connected on a few throws to Xavier Worthy. He was, as I said, really the only bright spot for the Chiefs. Over 150 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns. Everybody else, it wasn't working. It really was not working. And people were talking on social media, is this the worst that Patrick Mahomes has ever looked? In the first half, I don't think I could fight you on it. That was tough to watch. And it kind of all goes back to the offensive line. The problems we have discussed this year. And it's not everybody on the offensive line. But if I were to go back and listen to our Week 1 postgame after the Chiefs had narrowly escaped defeat from the Baltimore Ravens, a toe out of bounds was the difference, we talked about the left tackle play. The week after that, Suamataia gets shredded by Trey Hendrickson. We talked about the left tackle play. Every single game, if I were to go back and listen to these podcasts, somebody either would have called in and asked about the left tackle play, or we would have just talked about it on our own, or you would have heard somebody in the press conferences bring up left tackle play or offensive line play, right tackle play. And that's kind of what I put to bed here with this season. The main problem is eventually what got them in the end. And I'm not trying to say that Joe Thuney is the reason this team lost the Super Bowl. There were multiple contributing factors as to why they got their ass kicked by the Philadelphia Eagles. But the offensive line was an issue this year, and Joe Thuney was the one to step up and move from left guard to left tackle. That's hard to do. This is maybe more so of pointing the finger at the front office and saying, well, we can't say woe is me because we had a left guard playing left tackle, because that left tackle position was a bit of a dice roll this year. It was, can Wanye Morris make that step forward? Can Kingsley Suamataia be a starter in year 1? It turned out those two guys couldn't. You bring in, a guy to compete in DJ Humphries. He gets hurt in the first game that he plays. Then you have to go to Joe Thuney. And I thought Joe Thuney did a phenomenal job. Hell, he was great against Buffalo. He was one of the best offensive linemen, period, in the conference championship game. But tonight, I think when you go up against a front four like that, that's going to get exposed a little bit. Because you can't have the best left tackle play every single week when you're playing a left guard there. And no disrespect whatsoever to Joe Thuney, because he did what a lot of people cannot. But I think that's going to be the theme, if you will, going into the offseason. How can they shore up that side of the line? And I say this because Brett Veach is known to kind of do something like this in the postseason when they've lost before. How do we make sure that issue that just really contributed to the game isn't going to contribute to another postseason loss? When they lost to New England in the first go-around, the AFC title game, the defense was bad all year long. What happens? You let a couple of those veterans go. You let them walk. You move on from them. You trade D Ford. Justin Houston, gone. Eric Berry, gone. You bring in Tyrann Mathieu, Frank Clark. You fire Bob Sutton, bring in Steve Spagnuolo. You made the moves because you wanted to be sure that if you got to that spot again, the AFC title game, we're not losing because of the defense. You go to that COVID year when they got spanked by Tampa Bay. The offensive line was riddled with injuries. But you wanted to make sure that, hey, next go-around, if we're in the Super Bowl, we want to make sure that our offensive line is not a reason as to why we lose. Now, the next year, they lose to Cincinnati, but it was not because of offensive line play. It was just a second-half collapse. Changing up the wide receiver room, helping them out a little bit. Changing up the running back room. And for this team, look, they did a lot with the adversity they had to go through this year. Losing Rashee Rice. Dealing with that left tackle play. Losing Isaiah Pacheco. Not having Omenihu. Dealing with injuries in your secondary. Dealing with injuries on special teams, Harrison Butker. Dealing with injuries with guys like McCole Hardman and Sky Moore. And even though those aren't the main contributors, they're guys that have starting roles somewhere on either defense, offense, or special teams. And they still won 15 games. And they got the 1 seed. And they beat Buffalo. And they get to the Super Bowl. And I think the confidence that we all had was definitely all right to have. I don't think that just because you lose 40-22, you go, man, I was stupid for believing in the Chiefs. They were always going to get smoked. That's not really the case. But what I even failed to do was truly pay attention to how dominant that Eagles team was by the end of it. And it's not just tonight. I mean, you go to the NFC title game, you had a young, upstart Washington team that had already gone into Detroit and dethroned America's team, the team that everybody was picking from the NFC side to get to the Super Bowl. They had already been in a really tough environment and put up nearly 50 points and won that game. So they weren't really scared by the environment going into Philadelphia, but you know what the Eagles did? They decimated them. That game, as tonight was never close. Against Green Bay, the Eagles comfortably beat them. The only time it was close, which it happens in the postseason, was losing to the Rams in the final seconds as L.A. was trying to make a miracle drive happen. But even earlier on, I mean, Saquon Barkley was running wild. The Eagles had a 2-score lead, and the Rams were just clawing and trying everything to fight back. So you look at all these playoff games that the Eagles have had, they were comfortably winning a lot of them, and I really wasn't truly paying complete attention to that. It wasn't out of disrespect to the Eagles. It was more so of throw Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs up against anybody at this point because they just continue to prove everybody wrong time and time again. Tonight, it didn't work out. The Eagles were clearly the better team on paper, and they showed it. It's a tough pill to swallow, as I said, but this should not take away anything on the legacy, the dynasty of the Chiefs. Right? I know 3-2 in Super Bowls sounds a lot different than 4-1. And to have the three-peat, knowing that nobody else had done it, that's why tonight stings so much, because history was right there. It was right within your grasp. And maybe I shouldn't even say that because the game wasn't close. When you say something like that, it's that you had a true opportunity in the game. Reality was the Chiefs were never close. They got thumped from start to finish. 40-22, the final in the Super Bowl down in New Orleans. The Eagles take care of business, and they get revenge on Kansas City after winning 2 years ago. A much more thrilling game. That was 38-35, but I think Eagles fans, of course, are going to prefer this one being a bit of a snooze fest in the fourth quarter rather than losing late to Kansas City just 2 years ago. But, man, let us know your thoughts. Phone lines are open, 913-381-0810. That's 913-381-0810. We're going to get the thoughts from Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, a couple of players. But we do have one caller on the line right now. We'll probably get to your thoughts now, and then we will turn over to maybe some audio coming out of the break. But let's jump on the phone lines here and go to Gary. Gary, you're on the Red and Gold Postgame Show.
Well, I'm not going to tip my hat to the Eagles because in order for them to do what they did, you have to do something to allow them to do what they did. And Andy's got to change his philosophy up front. This athletic, light on their feet, guys that can move, that didn't work in this game, and that's what happened against Tampa too. You've got to get bigger and meaner up front. I mean, they were so small up front. They weren't even blitzing tonight. They were rushing 4 guys, and they were controlling the line of scrimmage at ease. The only guy on that offensive line I would bring back next year is Creed Humphrey. The other, Smith, if he gets a big contract, somebody's going to overpay for that because he was horrible tonight. I think Jawan Taylor got whiplash. There were a few times I saw him. He was getting dog walked into the backfield, and his neck was getting just shoved back. You could just see his head whip back every time the ball was snapped when the guy would get a hold of him. These guys were just It's just the style of offensive line that he likes. I mean, Andy has got to change that. And it's going to be like they got to chase the position every offseason. Last year we had to chase the wide receivers because you're overpaying for some of these guys instead of walking on them. That's why the Patriots were able to sustain the success they had. And the Patriots never got blown out in the Super Bowl because they were disciplined. On 4th and 5, they wouldn't have jumped off sides to create a first down, Charles Omenihu. The secondary was horrible tonight. I mean, let's face it, Jalen Hurts outplayed Patrick Mahomes in the 2 Super Bowls he's played him in. And because he has a wall in front of him. Those are men up front. We don't have men up front. And a note to Brett Beach on draft day, it's okay to draft linemen from Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan, Notre Dame, schools that actually produce offensive linemen. We don't go that route. Big 12 tackles don't hack it in this league. At Kingsley Suamati, Iamani Morris, those were 2 wasted picks. So Andy and Brett need to start looking at those schools. That was a Georgia defense tonight that beat the Chiefs. I'll hang up and listen. Great show.
I appreciate the phone call, Gary. And I know that a lot of people are going to feel down tonight. And, you open up saying, I'm not going to tip my cap to the Eagles. I don't blame you. If you're feeling that level tonight of, no, I think it was more so the Chiefs played really poor. They didn't do anything right. And it was easy, for the Eagles to be able to win that 140-22. Speaking of that wall you bring up with Philadelphia, I'm not going to say that, the Chiefs don't have strong offensive linemen because I do believe that they have Creed Humphrey and, Trey Smith and Joe Tooney and guys that on the interior have played at a very high level, an elite level. But Philadelphia, the size of that offensive line, I think they said the average size was 6'6", 360 something. So when I'm watching the first 10 minutes going, why are they not getting pressure on Jalen Hurts? Now you know. Mekhi Becton, the size of that guy, left tackle, right tackle, huge mountain of men. That is a ridiculous offensive line. And you want to know why Saquon Barkley ran for 2,000 yards this year? That's the offensive line he was running behind. I mean, Chris Jones, who usually mauls everybody that he's put up against, it was no contest tonight. It was increasingly difficult as the game wore on to do anything against what the Eagles were doing. Now, I will say this, and I'll wrap up this point, and then we'll hit a break, come back, might get to a few more calls. The Chiefs' run defense was good tonight. They slowed down Saquon Barkley. He averaged less than 3 yards a carry. Barely got anything going. Jalen Hurts had a turnover. But when you have a pick six, when you have a strip sack, when you have a turnover down 17 inside your own 20, when you're having penalties on the kickoff, all of those things, when you're dealing with that, you're not going to win many football games. And I know the Chiefs have overcome a lot of that before. They have played poorly before and won. They've done it in Super Bowls. They had fallen behind by 10 before. They had fallen behind by 10 in all 3 of their Super Bowl victories under Patrick Mahomes. Yet tonight was a different story. It's one thing to fall behind by 10 and have your offense clicking, have your offense moving. It's another to not even get past midfield and you're down by 10. The Chiefs could have been down by 7 points at halftime, 7-0. Let's say the Eagles just would have scored 7-0. You go into halftime. I don't think you would have felt very good at all because the offense wasn't doing anything. As Gary brought up, that was a Georgia defense. That front four is ridiculous for the Eagles. And I apologize for not bringing that up more on Arrowhead Pride Radio throughout the weeks when Pete and I were breaking down the game. I should have given more credit to that Philadelphia defense because at times, and I don't even want to say at times, the majority of this contest tonight, they made a good Chiefs offense look like a JV squad. I mean, so uncomfortable in the pocket. And when you're dealing with that type of pressure, you're dealing with that type of heat, you can't go through your normal reads. I think it's very easy for us to kick our feet up and, I'm sitting here in the break room watching the game, drinking a soda, And it's like, oh, Justin Watson's wide open. Why didn't Patrick Mahomes throw him the football? Because he had no faith and no trust that he was going to be upright by the time he saw him. This wasn't the case on every single play. I think there were moments where Patrick Mahomes had the time and either stepped up into the pressure, or Patrick Mahomes had the time, decided to bail and throw it where maybe somebody wasn't open. But that all starts in the first couple series where he is getting crunched. He is getting hit. And you start to go, man, we've got this play call, and I'm not confident that my wide receiver is even going to get to that part of his route. You know, if you've got a drag route, that's one thing. But you think about a comeback route, right? If you want to get it to Worthy, we've seen Worthy run a couple of comeback routes in the postseason, very successfully, I might add. But there had to have been moments breaking the huddle of, I don't think that he's going to break on that route before I get hit. And we saw those uncomfortable, footsteps in the pocket. And a few of them you're going, he needs to leave now. In fact, there was one play call where they finally had him roll out to the right. And it was just a sideline pass for 5 or 6 yards. And I thought to myself, why did they wait until the third quarter to call something like that? Because clearly staying in the pocket wasn't working. Completely abandoning the run. There were a couple of play calls, and it's not to completely come down on why the play calls were the way that they were, because nothing was working. Let's get that very straightforward. The passing game, the running game, it wasn't working. But I did find it interesting that when the Chiefs were still down 7 and they were down 10, the focus was, we're just airing it out. And Philadelphia got in the backfield every single time. Just Kareem Hunt had a 2-yard carry in the first quarter, and we never heard from him again. And then when the Chiefs were down 17, you run the ball on back-to-back plays when it's second and long or first and 10 and then second and long. It didn't make much sense. But I understand it, too, where, hey, we got to get the running game going if we're going to have a chance. So the running game never got going. And the passing game didn't get going until it was 34-0. And you had the garbage time points. Chiefs fall to the Eagles 40-22. They will not have the three-peat. It's now offseason time. It's offseason time for everybody. The Eagles are the Super Bowl champs. They get revenge on Kansas City for winning 2 years ago. I'm sure we'll be talking about it in this episode. What's next? What do you focus on?
We got a better pick than last year, at least.
Yes.
The only positive.
It's not 32.
Really. That's about the only positive.
Look at you. I said no sunshine and rainbows we're talking about. That technically is. It is one more
really
spot.
Is. It's the only ray.
It's the only ray that we can talk about. All right. Let's take our first break of the show. When we come back, might have some audio, or we might break down this game a little bit more with some callers' thoughts. You're listening to the Red and Gold Postgame Show on Sports Radio 810 WHB.
game was non-existent. I couldn't believe that Kareem and Pacheco couldn't get the running game going. And if I would have told you, I would have lived with Saquon Barkley getting 57 yards. You'd think the Chiefs had a great opportunity to win that game. They did the job on Saquon Barkley. So my brother John at Tupelo, Mississippi says, "Oh, the Chiefs got to do just retool that offensive line." I texted you on that on the Facebook, and we'll be back next year. So let's take care, Jack. Take care of the Super Bowl next year. Take care.
Appreciate the call, Dan, and thanks for all your input all season long. Because this is it. This is the final Red and Gold postgame show of the year, and certainly has a sour end. I'm not going to complain about doing this show for a team that won 15 regular season games and got all the way to the Super Bowl, but it's tough to spin it tonight as anything but a negative, falling short of history. And I am curious in a day or two, right? Because it's raw right now. The emotion of this is incredibly raw. You don't want to talk about what an incredible season it was. You don't want to talk about how hard it is to get to the Super Bowl, because we all have this same feeling as fans, that once you get there, I expect you to win. And then a week later, 2 weeks later, if you don't, I can appreciate the season. Like, I've done post-game shows now for this Chiefs team. I did it for the Royals in the postseason. We've had times with college teams doing something like that. But when there is a loss like this, and it's at the highest level, or it's just a postseason loss, many of you, including myself, you don't really want to think about, down the road, you're really going to appreciate how incredible this was, mainly because of how much of an ass-kicking this ended up being. As I said before, as I say again, it was never close. 40-22 did not do that game justice. This felt like a 50-0 game for the entirety of the night. There really was not one moment in the game where you went, I think they're picking up some steam. I think they've got some momentum. And what would you have thought if I just would have read off the box score and said Saquon Barkley was held to less than 3 yards a carry? You probably would have all mailed in your pick of the Chiefs won comfortably. Because if Saquon Barkley had less than 60 yards, then you're just counting on Jalen Hurts to have a phenomenal, a all-pro type of performance in the Super Bowl like he did in the first go-round when they met in the Super Bowl. But you would have been asking him to do that. But the Chiefs took care of the guy they really needed to focus on. What they didn't take care of was that Eagles defense, which was a different beast. That was a nightmare. An absolute nightmare to watch. I mean, I see a couple of the highlights that are just flowing through. I've been on my phone in between breaks looking at some of these plays. Not all of it was just a perfect disguised blitz, and there wasn't much blitzing from Philadelphia. They just won those one-on-one battles, but what kind of makes you shudder, what sends a chill down your spine is there's a couple of snaps, whether it be Sweat, whether it be Davis, whether it be Smith, that they just walked a lineman back into the pocket. I mean, a straight bull rush, and had the sheer strength and power to take a 6'4", 6'5", 300-plus pound man and walk him back into Patrick Mahomes. Every snap, it felt like that was happening. And even some of the best on that Chiefs offensive line, Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, there were some moments in that game that they got beat pretty good. Saw Trey Smith, I think, get called for a hold. He's having to hang on for dear life, and we don't see that very often from those guys. Those guys are some of the best at their position. That's how good Philadelphia's pass rush was tonight. And I do think their secondary deserves some credit as well. But I'll tell you this, it's a hell of a lot easier to be a good cornerback, a great cornerback, when you have a pass rush like that. You might not be defending for the whole route. You might not be going further than 10, 15 yards down the field before somebody like Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson is having to improvise at that point. Like that Philadelphia team, they were headlined by Saquon Barkley. And they had the story of Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts being these two guys that were heavily criticized, and yet they overcame it. But that defense, as we saw the night against Kansas City, that was the headliner to me. That group, at times, didn't get talked about enough. And that's the point I'm trying to hammer home here. I spent a lot of time last week, the week before that, saying, you got to slow down Saquon Barkley. You got to find a way to bottle him up, make Jalen Hurts beat you. If you make Jalen Hurts beat you, I'm going to take Patrick Mahomes over Jalen Hurts in that spot. But what I didn't spend enough time on was this offensive line against that Philly pass rush. Because that was the difference in the game. That was the story. That's why we're talking about the Chiefs losing their second Super Bowl in 5 tries and not being the first team to ever three-peat. Like, I think on paper, this was a good matchup for the Chiefs. They were favored by Vegas. 1.5 was the line right before kickoff. But that's also Vegas. And a lot of people said, I don't want to pick against Patrick Mahomes. But when Patrick Mahomes has no time, and he's constantly running for his life, and he's getting pressured on 50% of the dropbacks, that is when you could bet against him, because no quarterback is going to look great in a spot like that. No quarterback is really ever going to be successful if you're being pressured 50% of the time. I mean, the Eagles could have had, as I said, a very poor first half offensively. Saquon Barkley barely got going. Jalen Hurts had an interception. They could have had 7 points. And I don't know if you would have felt great at halftime that the Chiefs could have overcome that. And in this Chiefs era with Patrick Mahomes, we certainly got a little bit spoiled early on in the Tyreek Hill days and the younger Travis Kelce days where against Houston, the divisional round, they were down 24-0 and erased that in one quarter. They were down 24-0 and led 28-24 10 minutes later. A lot of weird stuff happened. You had the fake punt. Current Chief Justin Reid gets tackled by former Chief Dan Sorensen. They got the kickoff where there's the fumble. It pops up in the air. Darwin Thompson, for whatever reason, decided not to keep running. He kind of showed the ball and said, can I run with this? But anyways, the Chiefs overcame a 4-score deficit in one quarter. We saw them the next week against Tennessee fall behind 17-7, and they won that game by double digits. We've seen in 3 Super Bowls them fall behind by 10 points, overcome it, and win. This Chiefs team, though, I don't really think had that true spark to overcome a double-digit deficit when you're playing a team like that. And it's not that Patrick Mahomes wasn't capable. I just don't think that team was built to do it. I think that Chiefs team, with all the close wins they had, it was, hey, well, let's get out. 7 points, 10 points, maybe late in the game it's just 3 points, but let's win it with our defense. Let's win it with the guys up front. Let's win it with our all-pro cornerback and Trent McDuffie, and when Jalen Watson comes back, that's how we're going to do it. But when your offense is getting pounded like that, it doesn't really matter what type of A game you bring. I mean, it just never felt like tonight the Chiefs had something figured out. It never felt like, even after halftime, hey, we got something clicking now. We saw where the problems were. We know this offensive line had issues. But here, I think, was also the biggest problem going into halftime. Is I think it's one thing when you're down 24-0 to go, okay, we've had some bad turnovers, take care of the football. Right? Quarterback, we're not going to throw into double coverage anymore. Running back, hang on to the football. Don't fumble. They're going to try to punch it out. Those things are easily correctable. At times, even though it's a physical mistake, it can be mental. You're not thinking to have good ball secured in that spot. You're trying to press too much. It can be spun as a mental thing as well. But what was frightening, and what was the biggest problem going into halftime, was that the Eagles were just winning up front. They were not blitzing. They were just winning the one-on-ones. They were rushing 4. The same way, right, when the Chiefs had that collapse against Cincinnati in the AFC title game a few years back, they were just rushing 3. They were dropping 8. And yet they were still getting pressure on Patrick Mahomes. And tonight, how do you scheme around that? They still have to block those guys, and they were just stronger, more physical, quicker, more athletic in a lot of those snaps. And when they're winning those one-on-ones, you can't always overcome that. Not when it's 24-0. 7-0, maybe, because you get one drive here, man, you feel like you can get back into the game. But the Chiefs didn't cross midfield until the third quarter. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins, that's kind of when you knew this thing was headed down the drain. When DeAndre Hopkins tripped over his own feet, dropped the ball right before halftime, and he had nobody within 40 yards of him. He would have gotten down maybe inside the 25-20. The Chiefs could have had some momentum going into the break. That didn't happen. And like I said, there was no momentum at any point in this game. There just wasn't. Chiefs fall 40-22 at the hands of the Philadelphia Eagles. I know a lot of people on Facebook tonight very frustrated. Callers, I think, having reason behind what they were saying. I truly do appreciate it because sometimes when we have the phone lines open, people can get really hot and get really upset. And we also have to acknowledge that there's no cursing on this show. At least there's certain words you can't curse. And I was fearful tonight. And opening the phone lines that we might have some really angry people, but also this. When you get your ass kicked, I feel like we've done this before. When you get your ass kicked like that, you have a lot of time to simmer down. And for me, I've been simmering down since the second quarter. Right? If they blew that game like Cincinnati, or they lost in overtime like they did against New England, it's a different type of anger. Tonight, it's more so of just a somber feeling. You're upset, you're disappointed because history was right there. History was on the line tonight. And a three-peat is incredibly difficult to do in this league. That's why it's never been done. There's no guarantee you're going to have that opportunity again, which is why I think tonight just stings a little bit more. You may never get that opportunity at history again. Not many teams will. Maybe somebody down the road will be able to pull it off, but now it's about winning one again. And I think the Chiefs will be very motivated to use this. I know Andy Reid already said, we're going to learn from this. You got to use this, remember it, and try to take it into next year and get right back to this spot and not get drubbed in the way they got drubbed tonight by the Philadelphia Eagles. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll hear from Andy Reid right here on the Red and Gold Postgame Show on Sports Radio 810 WHB. But without further ado, here was Andy Reid after the 40-22 loss to the Philadelphia Eagles in the Super Bowl.
All right. Listen, a compliment to our fans and all the support that they've given us. Today was a rough day. We didn't really play well in any of the phases. Didn't coach good enough. They did a nice job. I'm proud of our guys, though, for the battle, the fight that they put in throughout the year, and all the games that they've played here over the last few years. So my hat goes off to the guys for that. And we'll learn from this. Like most games here, when you don't do very well, you learn from it as a coach, you learn from it as a player, and you move on. So time's yours.
I think this feeling that at least I've had, I'd be curious, those out there still listening and wanting to get really all the emotion out in a loss like this. But you go back to that Super Bowl loss to Tampa Bay in 2021, the feeling right after it. And it was, man, who knows if they get back again. You know how hard it is to get to a Super Bowl, let alone back-to-back? Right, we were just talking about back-to-back Super Bowls at that point. And would Patrick Mahomes ever catch Tom Brady? I mean, Brady's now got 7, Mahomes has 1. And the Chiefs went on to get to 3 more Super Bowls after that and win 2 of them and have a chance to be the first team to ever three-peat. So when Andy Reid says we're going to learn from it, I know right now it feels like, man, 3 straight Super Bowls, what's the odds of getting the 4? They're not high, I'll tell you that. But they were also very low to get to a 3rd straight Super Bowl and have this opportunity, especially with all the injuries that they went through. Hopefully next year they're healthier. They can shore up that offensive line and, as Reid said, learn from it. Learn from it so that a loss like this does not ever happen again, period. Not just because of the Super Bowl. Now, speaking of things going wrong, what did Andy Reid think went wrong in this loss?
Yeah, listen, too many turnovers, too many penalties. Against a good football team, you just can't do that.
And I think that's pretty simple. And turnovers and penalties aren't good, but also the offensive line play wasn't good enough. Because when we talk about those turnovers, I would say a handful of them, over 50%, even though there was only 3. There was the strip sack. That is attributed to the offensive line. You had the interception. One of them very much on Patrick Mahomes. Number 2, I think it was kind of a mix. I think it was 50-50. He had no time. It was 3rd and long. He was pressing. So I wouldn't have hated it if Andy Reid threw that in and said, we didn't really protect our quarterback very well, but he oftentimes doesn't really bring that up. And this year, it was an issue in a few of the games where Patrick Mahomes barely had any time to throw the football. Tonight, I think that was very much the case where in the first half, he was running for his life. Or he could never run because he was engulfed by that Philadelphia pass rush. He also went on to talk about Nick Sirianni and him just out-coaching him in a game like this.
Yeah, so Vic does a nice job with that defense. They played well. They've got good players and good scheme, and they executed better than what we did. They coached better, starts with me, and they played better.
It's one of those games where there's not one thing the Chiefs did better. And usually coaches are going to take that blame and say, I got to be better in this spot. I didn't have our team as prepared. It's pretty jarring that not a single thing in this game the Chiefs did better. They did not have the better quarterback play. They did not have the better running game. They didn't have the better special teams. That was another part about this. Jake Elliott, tonight for Philadelphia, though it wasn't like he was kicking with the game on the line, but 2 40-plus yard field goals, a 50-yard field goal, all of them were good from probably 60 to 65. I mean, they were very buttoned up tonight. And Kansas City just wasn't. And Andy Reid is echoing that. That just every facet of the game, they were not good in. And that's when you have a loss like this, especially for a team like the Chiefs, who never get blown out. He talked about that Eagles defensive line and how much they shook up everything for the Chiefs offense.
Coach, can you talk about the offensive line struggles and how defense got so many sacks on Mahomes?
Yeah, their defensive line did a nice job. And, again, that happens in these games. The lines get magnified there a little bit.
It was a freakish defensive line. As he was answering that, I'm looking up at the TV on the left, and it was the second interception that Patrick Mahomes had. They're showing a play where Joe Tooney just got walked back straight into Mahomes. Mahomes got bumped, and that ball kind of sails on him a little bit. And I think it wasn't Zach Bond that got the pick on that. Just no time. And every snap, it almost kind of made you have this sense of dread. Like, he just better get the ball out now. I don't care if it's a 3-yard out. I don't care if it's a 4-yard, 5-yard little pickup. Because I just feel like if he waits any longer, he's going to be brought down in the backfield. And that happened a lot to Patrick Mahomes tonight, getting pressured nearly 50% of the time. It's an absurd stat. And the offensive line got dominated, and Andy Reid said that with that Eagles defensive front. And lastly, when talking about Super Bowl losses, does this one hurt just a little bit more than the Tampa Bay one? Here's Andy Reid on that.
Yeah, listen, they all hurt. You get this far, you battled your tail off to get there. Hard to do. And it's we spent a lot of time doing this. And it's not a hobby, right? So we're in it the whole way, and spent a lot of hours doing it as players, as coaches. So it's going to hurt. They all hurt when you get to this level, and these things happen. Three-peat aside or any of that stuff. That you get this far and you don't play as well as you want to. It hurts.
And that was Andy Reid after the game tonight, 40-22 in favor of the Philadelphia Eagles. They are the Super Bowl champs this year. Kansas City will not three-peat. I guess my lasting thoughts on that, what hurts worse? It did hurt back in 2021 because it was Brady, and Mahomes hadn't beaten him in the postseason, and it was such an ass-kicking. And we're talking about the passing of the torch. Brady's going to give it to Mahomes, and Mahomes is going to have back-to-back Super Bowl wins. Brady's going to retire, and now the face of the league will be number 15. So when he lost that game, it was incredibly painful, I think, for the entire fan base. And it was incredibly painful for the players. I mean, Patrick Mahomes said this week that that's the game that sticks with him the most. It wasn't Cincinnati. It wasn't the New England loss. It was that Super Bowl loss against Tampa Bay. And I think everybody would have a right to pick that one as more hurtful. It stung more because it was Brady. I was able to say, well, that one hurts really bad, but they also had a backup offensive line. That's the difference with tonight's game. They were as healthy as they've really ever been. Everybody was rested, felt like they were good to go, all hands on deck, and nothing went right. And the unfortunate reality in this sport is that can happen. In the NFL, I know it just hasn't been that way with Patrick Mahomes as the quarterback. We know that crazy stat about times he's lost by more than 2 scores. It just never happens. And to do it in the Super Bowl, now 2 losses in the Super Bowl by double digits, really a large number there for the deficit. 31-9 against Tom Brady in 2021, 40-22 tonight against Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles. You can't really wrap your mind around it. It's staggering because of how good this Chiefs team had been, how they'd always been in the postseason. And when they fall flat like this, it takes you back. And I definitely bet it took Patrick Mahomes back. We're actually going to hear from him next, and then we'll also have some more player audio later on in the show. And we're going to hear for the final time this year from Matt Derrick of ChiefsDigest.com. But let's take a quick break. When we come back, we hear from the quarterback, Patrick Mahomes, on the Red and Gold Postgame Show on Sports Radio 810 WHB. And that Cook interception was the Box Stack the Box defensive play of the game. Kick your tailgate party up a notch this football season with Box, the ultimate tailgate wine. Box is the premium boxed wine that wins with wine critics. Box, this is how we Boda. Please drink responsibly. Sponsored by Box Vineyards, Manteca, California. We heard from Andy Reid. Now it's time to hear from Patrick Mahomes. He got to a lot in this game. He also got touched a lot in this game. Let's just call it that. Was under pressure a lot. Sacked multiple times. Hurried, pressured, whatever you want to call it. Had 3 turnovers in this one. It was never comfortable. Somebody had a paw on Patrick Mahomes. It felt like every single time he dropped back, he talks about that. He talks about the turnovers. And he talks about which loss hurt worse in the Super Bowl. As we brought up before the break, Patrick Mahomes said this week that that's the loss that always sticks with him. The one to Tom Brady while he was with Tampa Bay, the final Super Bowl that Brady won. Brady had already eliminated him in the postseason earlier in his career. In fact, it was the first year that Mahomes was the full-time starter for Kansas City. But did this one hurt worse? We're definitely going to hear about it throughout his interview. But to start things off, here was Patrick Mahomes and his initial reaction after a 40-22 loss to Philadelphia.
Credit to the Eagles, man. They played better than us from start to finish. We didn't start how we wanted to. Obviously, the turnovers hurt. And, I take all the blame for that. Just those early turnovers swing the momentum of the game, and then they capitalized on them, and they scored. They scored on the one, and then they got a touchdown immediately after. So that's 14 points that I kind of gave them, and it's hard to come back from that in the Super Bowl. And so just didn't play to my standard, and I have to be better next time.
And speaking of some of those turnovers, I think a lot of people had to be wondering, what was Patrick Mahomes seeing? On the first one, he tried to go for Hollywood Brown. The second one, I think, actually was intended for Hollywood Brown as well. But both of them, it just appeared that he didn't see an Eagles defender that was either coming over or just sitting right there. It felt like Bond on that second interception was just hidden from Mahomes when he tried to get rid of the football, but also got backed into by Joe Thuney because Joe Thuney got walked back into the pocket. The first time around, it was a bad decision. And actually, in the first series that Mahomes had in the game, he was very fortunate not to have an interception because he was rolling around on 3rd and long and fired one near the sideline that nearly got picked off, and that was really a sign of things to come. But here was Patrick Mahomes on what he saw in both those interceptions and what he took away from it.
Yeah, the kid made a great play. He sat underneath Worthy, and I tried to reset back and throw it across the D-hop and to put it in a tight window, and he made a great play on it. And then returned it for a touchdown. And then the second interception, I was trying to throw it to Hollywood, got bumped a little bit, but still can't. Got to find a way to make the throw. When I kind of sailed behind Hollywood and went right to the linebacker.
Yeah, that second interception was, I think, a little bit on Mahomes and I think a little bit on Joe Thuney, just getting pushed back into that spot where then he runs into Patrick Mahomes, and I have to imagine that it did affect that throw a little bit on that play. And that almost, to me, even though I think it was, maybe it was Brady on the broadcast said that it was the dagger on that 34-0, point in the game right after Devontae Smith had the touchdown grab. But to me, that did feel like the dagger. When they were already down 17-0, and you throw an interception deep in your own territory, that's kind of when it felt like this was going to be the beginning of the end for the Chiefs season in 2024/2025. Now, about that defense, causing all kinds of havoc, here was Patrick Mahomes comparing that Philly pass rush to the one he saw in his last Super Bowl loss against the Buccaneers.
Yeah, they played great. There's no way around it. They played great from start to finish. They got after it. Defensive line played really well. The DBs played well to complement them, and linebackers as well. And so, like I said, I can't turn the ball over early in the game when it's not going our way, and I'll have to learn from that and try to be better the next opportunity that I hopefully get. Both suck. There's no way around it. Anytime you lose a Super Bowl, it's the worst feeling in the world. They'll stick with you the rest of your career. These will be the 2 losses that will motivate me to be even better for the rest of my career, because you only get so few of these, and you have to capitalize on these, and they hurt probably more than the wins feel good.
think that's a good way to put it. Sometimes those losses at this point in the season, they're worse than those close wins. Thinking back to when they beat Buffalo in the AFC title game, that feels like such a distant memory at that point, even though it was a great achievement, beating the Bills. This one, it just stings so much worse because it was the Super Bowl, because you were right there for history, and the Eagles flat out outplayed you. They just dominated you from start to finish, and so Patrick Mahomes said it sucks. Now, after losing a game like that in the Super Bowl, what's the message to the team in the locker room?
No, I mean, not necessarily. Losing the Super Bowl just doesn't feel good either way. Anyway, I was proud of how my team fought this entire season with the expectations that we had on us, but we came up short, and so now it's how you respond, and hopefully that we can learn from this like we learned from the last loss that we had, and try to continue to get even better, because it's going to take a better football, especially for me, in order to try to make a run at another Super Bowl. I didn't have to say much. I thought other leaders, Chris Jones especially, spoke, and like we talked about, it hurts. It's going to hurt for a while, but how can you respond from it? We have a great football team. We still have a young football team, and a lot of these guys will be their first time having defeat in a season. And how can you get better? How can you not be satisfied with just getting here and taking your game to the next level? And that starts with me and the other leaders on this team, but it'll feed throughout the entire team, and hopefully we can come back next season and put up a better effort.
And that is a wild stat to think about, that 2022 draft class that we brought up in the aftermath of the Chiefs-Bills game. This is their first postseason loss. Trent McDuffie, George Karlaftis, Josh Williams, Brian Cook, Isaiah Pacheco. They had never seen a postseason loss until tonight. So it's going to sting a little bit more with them. But also the good point is they're still young, right? That's learning from this, building this roster. And there are going to be some roster decisions this offseason. But there are certain guys they're going to be building around on both the defensive side of things and the offensive side of things to help Patrick Mahomes. Now, on Mahomes, clearly wasn't his best performance. The numbers, when it was all said and done, don't look as bad as they did in the first half, but clearly this is not the way that Mahomes expected to play, and I think for a lot of people out there, didn't expect him to play even as good as that Philly defense was. Here was Mahomes talking about the standard that he sets for himself.
I thought our team played really well. I feel like I didn't play to my standard, just with especially the struggles that I had early in the season, and so there's things that I have to get better at, and they kind of showed today on the biggest stage. And so I'm about to find a way this offseason to combat what defenses are doing to me as far as rush lanes and different coverages that they're playing. And that's the beauty of football, is that you never can be satisfied with just going out there and playing and thinking you're going to have success year in and year out. These defenses are going to continue to get better and better, and so I have to get better. And so I take a lot of ownership in that, and I want to hopefully come back and play better football this next season.
And when you're going over those 2 interceptions, sometimes it's just compounding it, right? If things aren't clicking, you're trying to press a little bit, you can tend to make things worse. Even the best guys out there, the best quarterbacks, the Hall of Famers, which Patrick Mahomes is going to be, you just can't turn a bad mistake into a worse mistake. And there were just too many of those in the game tonight. Here was Patrick Mahomes on that exact thing, making things worse when you don't need them to be.
Yeah, I think just when defenses are going to play the shell coverage and stay back and play man on third down, I can't make bad plays worse. And I think that's something that you saw today, is that there was times when guys aren't open and I need to throw the ball away or check it down and let other guys make plays happen. Sometimes I get in where I want to make a big play to kind of spark us, and that's something that I've dealt with my entire career. And if I don't show that I will take what's there in the game, the defenses are going to stay in the coverages that they're in. And I think they only blitzed like 2 times, 1 time this entire game today. So they were going to make me be a fundamental quarterback from the pocket and take what's there, and that stuff I have to get better at.
Now, maybe you're a big baseball fan and you're excited for Royal Spring Training right around the corner. Maybe you're still a huge college basketball fan and March Madness is right around the corner. But maybe you're like a lot of people tonight, where football is your thing, it's all you care about, and you're dreading the offseason because it's going to be a long time until football is played again. Dylan pointing to himself right there. But Patrick Mahomes reiterated, it's a short offseason. You get to working out, and then before you know it, they'll be showing up in St. Joe again for training camp. But here is Patrick Mahomes on that shorter offseason.
No, not really. I mean, it's just the pressure of the Super Bowl. There's always pressure, and you have to find ways to deal with that and find ways to respond to that. And we've had good games, and we've had games like this now, and we'll have to find ways to respond to this adversity. And like I said, hopefully it'll motivate these guys, especially myself, to be even better. And it's a short off season. We have a lot of guys come back. We'll have some guys that won't, but it's a short off season, and we have to get better, and so that hopefully we get this opportunity again that we can go out there and capitalize on it.
One of those final things that he said, we'll have some guys that come back and there will be some guys that won't. That's just the reality of it. But one name that is probably the highlighted one, the circled one, is Travis Kelce. And it's not that he's going somewhere else to play football. It'll just be the simple question, was this it? Is he going to be retiring after this season? I don't think so just yet. That's my hunch. That is purely speculation. But Travis Kelce is going to have a decision to make. We saw that report from Ian Rappaport of, the story of we'll know a little bit more after the game, win or lose, and have to wonder what's going through Travis Kelce's mind. But here was Patrick Mahomes on the idea of Travis Kelce possibly retiring.
I'll let Travis make that decision on his own, man. He's given so much to this team and to the NFL, and been such a joy not only for me to work with, but for people to watch. And so he knows he still has a lot of football left in him. I mean, you can see it. He always makes plays in the biggest moments. But it's if he wants to put in that grind, because it's a grind to go out there and play 20 games, whatever it is, and get to the Super Bowl. And he's done enough to be a gold jacket guy and first ballot Hall of Famer. But I know he still has love for the game, and he'll get to spend some time with his family and make that decision on his own. But I mean, he knows he'll come back here with welcome arms. We love that guy, not only for the football player, but the person that he is every single day.
It certainly is a grind, and that would be another grind of a season for Travis Kelce if he does decide to come back and play another year in Kansas City. Well, it was a grind for the Chiefs tonight, trailing 34-0 at one point, but Patrick Mahomes was still proud that his team fought all the way to the end.
Not me. I mean, I feel like that's why I was proud of the guys. Like, we're going to fight to the end, and that's just who we are. You get to a point where it's kind of out of reach, but I mean, all you can do is go out there and take it play by play. That's what we did. We fought to the very end. I was proud of the guys. Obviously, we didn't play great football. Like I said, it started with myself, and I will take full ownership in that. But I was proud of how the guys kept fighting to the very end of that football game and until those clocks hit zero.
I can give him credit there. I think we opened it up and maybe one of the first few topics in our first segment of the score. It was not as close as 40-22, even though that is a 3-score loss. But I will give them credit that they could have completely rolled over and mailed it in and lost 50-something to nothing, and it really looked ugly. But they did get the offense going a little bit better, I guess, late than never. Xavier Worthy was the star of the show, as much as a star could be, in a 18-point loss, but 157 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns. It's exciting things to come for him, and that is at least one thing you can take away of if you are going to get beat down, at least have one of your young players have a good performance like Xavier Worthy did. And I know it could have been a different story in the first half if he's making some plays like that, but again, not a lot of positives to take away. When you lose by that margin, when you were down 34-0, how can you really spin it other than all negative things? But Xavier Worthy was playing well. I'm sure that's why Patrick Mahomes was proud, at least, that they all fought to the end, and Worthy was one of those guys that absolutely fought until the clock hit zeros. Last couple questions and answers here from Patrick Mahomes. He was asked about the Eagles not blitzing, yet always getting in the pocket, getting in the backfield. Here was Mahomes on that.
I think in order to make a team blitz, you have to be able to beat what they're showing, and that's what we didn't do, especially in the first half. And we made some good adjustments in halftime and came out better, but it was almost too late. The momentum had kind of flipped in their favor in how they play with Saquon and how they can run the football and control the clock with Jalen making big third-down conversions. It kind of put our defense in a really bad spot. And so when you're in these big games, you have to play better from the beginning. And that's stuff that I'll have to continue to work on and continue to get better at, and force defenses to blitz by attacking their zone coverage the right way. And so that's something that I can continue to get better at in my career. Yeah, I threw 2 interceptions in their end. I mean, I threw a pick 6, and I threw a pick that they returned to the 5-yard line, and they scored immediately after. So when you give a team 14 points, especially a really good football team, a Super Bowl football team, then not a lot of good things happen. And so that's why I take ownership in this loss more than probably any loss in my entire career, is because I put us in a bad spot. And even though we put up some stats at the end of the game, those stats didn't really matter because I'd already kind of lost the momentum for this entire team. And so I have to be better at not turning over whenever it's not going my way, trusting in my defense, trusting the rest of my team to get those stops until I can figure out what we need to do as an offense.
It was tough. It was tough to get the offense going. I know Patrick Mahomes is going to take a lot of blame in that, but as we keep circling back to, there were a lot of different factors. There was not a single thing that was going right for Kansas City in this game, and very few times in Patrick Mahomes' career that's the way that it looks. Now, on the opposite sideline, you had Jalen Hurts winning his first Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes has a ton of respect for him. Here's what he thought on Jalen Hurts getting that first Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things. I mean, but the one thing that I've always respected about Jalen is that he's a winner. And I know that some people take that as like it's not a good thing, but you have to find ways to win with your football team that you have around you. And that's what I've learned in my entire career, and that's what he's came into the NFL and done his entire career, is that if he needs to run the ball, he will run it. If he needs to throw the ball, he will throw it. And if he needs to make a big play, he will make the big play. And so that's stuff that not everybody has, and that's something that I have a lot of respect for Jalen. And I said it after the first Super Bowl we played against. I said he will be back, and he was, and he got the better of me today. And I'm sure we'll face again at some point in our careers in a big game like this.
And now Jalen Hurts will have that pressure going in the next year of, you got to do it again. If you want to be compared to Patrick Mahomes, the guy that's won 3, was going for a three-peat, you now got to put yourself in that category to go for back-to-back, which will be incredibly difficult to do, considering how stacked the NFC will be once again next season. And lastly, kind of circling back to halftime, Patrick Mahomes said they still felt like there was an opportunity for them coming out for the third quarter down 24-0.
100%. I mean, we were confident to the very end. I mean, we there's been crazier things that's happened in the NFL, and we needed to get a score that first drive, which we didn't get, obviously, and so that one hurt us. But all you can do is take it play by play and give everything you have, and I'm proud of our guys for how they did that in the face of adversity. And when a lot of teams probably would have just folded and gave up, we just kept fighting to the very end. And obviously it didn't go our way, and it'll be something that we'll look back on for the rest of our careers. But I'm proud of the fight those guys had.
Patrick, when you visualize this game, did you envision like it coming down to the end and needing to make the sort of plays that you had, or did you not see it that deeply?
I expected that just because that's how most games happen. Is that you're down to the very end of the game. That's when you get 2 good football teams going. But like I said, they played better than us, kind of in all aspects. And then I compile it with mistakes, then it turns into a big lead, and then we end up getting a blowout. And so, like I said, I'm proud of the guys and how they competed. It was something that we'll think about for the rest of our careers and hopefully motivate us to be even better. Yep. Thank you all.
All right, that was Patrick Mahomes after the game, a 40-22 loss at the hands of the Philadelphia Eagles. Coming up next, we're going to have our locker room report, a couple players that we're going to hear from following this game. I know a lot of people do have on their minds, what's Travis Kelce thinking? What's Xavier Worthy thinking? What's DeAndre Hopkins maybe thinking? We'll get to those guys next on the Red and Gold Postgame Show on Sports Radio 810 WHB. in construction. You can make the right call as well by visiting shamrockroofer.com. Shamrock Roofing and Construction, one call does it all. And for the last time this season, we're going to hop on the phone lines and talk with our guy Matt Derrick of ChiefsDigest.com. And he's brought to you by Cap One Lending. The Freedom Loan at Cap One Lending is the exclusive loan that helps you pay your home off in less than half the time and gives you access to your home's equity without having to refinance. Go to CapOneLending.com. Well, Matt, I don't think any of us could have predicted the game to go that poorly, where the Eagles just dominated Kansas City from start to finish at one point, leading 34-0. Was there a world going into this game, Matt, where you thought this would be possible, or is this just so difficult to comprehend that a Patrick Mahomes-led team could be down that much in a playoff game?
I mean, across the board, I can't believe that a Patrick Mahomes-led team, an Andy Reid coach team, a Steve Spagnuolo defensive coordinator team, go on and down the list. And I'll take the L on this because I said before the game I thought that, I thought it would be close more than likely than not. But if this game become blowout, Chiefs were going to win because I just did not think that the Eagles had this in them. But when your quarterback looks just awful most of the night until garbage time in the fourth quarter, I mean, that can happen, and I'm perplexed. I have no idea what I just saw and how it happened.
It felt like in this game the pressure that Patrick Mahomes was under basically resembled what happened against Tampa Bay a few Super Bowls ago. The other loss that Patrick Mahomes has had in a Super Bowl, he's now 3-2. Was it all on the offensive line, or do you feel like it was split maybe 50-50, where a couple times, yes, a guy like Joe Tooney or Jawan Taylor or Trey Smith got beat, but other times it did feel like maybe Patrick Mahomes ran into a sack? Where were you at with all the quarterback pressures and the sacks that happened in this game for KC's offense?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that it looked like Patrick Mahomes kind of regressed back to when he was struggling earlier in the season. And you get behind and once again, I mean, there's always the question about, Patrick Mahomes coming overhyped in some of these games. And I know he started, I think, 2-2, had a couple of quick throws, and that was great. But then after that, you saw his eyes start to wander downfield, and if he didn't see anything open, he was trying to make it happen and was absolutely bypassing some open plays underneath. Should have been taking the quick throws because that's what the play was designed to do, was for some quick throws. And he was bypassing that, trying to make a big play. And once you do that, it's disaster. And he had, obviously the first interception across his body. There's just no excuse for that. I mean, that's something that, a veteran quarterback shouldn't do. But once again, he's pressing and he's trying to make something happen. You just can't do that in that situation.
We're talking with Matt Derrick of ChiefsDigest.com after a 40-22 loss in the Super Bowl for the Kansas City Chiefs against the Philadelphia Eagles. We've seen, Matt, over the course of Brett Veach's time in Kansas City, that when they've lost in a playoff game, he addresses the biggest hole for that team, right? The reason they lost a certain game, we're going to find somebody to replace that problem. The first time around, it was against New England, one of the worst defenses in football. You fire Bob Sutton, you bring in Frank Clark, you bring in Tyrann Mathieu. It worked out in your favor. After they lost to Tampa Bay, it was the overhaul in the offensive line. Do you feel like the Chiefs could be heading to something this offseason where they got punked? They got absolutely beat down by this Philly team, and the offensive line certainly had its issues, but there were, I think, a handful of issues this year where when the Chiefs were confronted with a defense like this, which there weren't many better defenses out there than Philadelphia, but they ran into some serious problems. So do you see an offseason where Brett Veach goes, we lost because the offensive line didn't play well at all? Now we got to address that a lot better than maybe we did in the previous offseason.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing is that you've got some trade-offs that you have to make. And, for the Chiefs going forward, I mean, they know with the salary cap hits that they have on some of their stars and some of the guys that they want to lock up long-term, continue doing that, that means that they're just going to have to hit in the draft. They're going to have to continue to make good picks. They're going to have to identify talent. And, you start to look at some of the holes. Chiefs know they need a left tackle. They need probably 3 defensive linemen. They need a corner. They need a linebacker, because I'm not convinced that at this point that Nick Bolton's coming back. I mean, even though the offensive line struggled tonight, they've got some young guys that they like. But even though you look at the left tackle spot, who's going to fill that? I mean, I don't know because there's no help out there. There's not a left tackle of significant quality. I mean, I think right now Cam Robinson looks like he would be the only left tackle out there in the free agent market that you might say is somebody you would consider. But the Chiefs are going to, I think, throw a bunch of money at a Cam Robinson. You look at the trade market. I'm not sure there's anybody that they can find there, and they don't want to give up draft picks. So it's a real catch-22. And then you look at even the draft. Last year they took a third-round tackle. Let's face it. I mean, we tried to talk everybody in Kansas City tried to talk themselves into that. That Kingsley Suamataia was more than that, but he and Wanye Morris were third-round tackles. That's what they were. Doesn't happen very often that those guys hit and become stars. So I just feel like that the Chiefs, in a couple of spots, especially that left tackle spot, I just don't know what they're going to do. But I also don't see this team panicking.
We're talking with Matt Derrick of ChiefsDigest.com here on the Red and Gold Postgame Show on Sports Radio 810 WHB. Were you surprised at the play calling a little bit, or can you not be overly critical about the play calling when nothing's working, right? It felt like early on they abandoned the run, and then when they were down 3 scores, they're maybe running the ball when they shouldn't be. You got to be a little bit more aggressive. But, Matt, I'll be honest, nothing was clicking. Whether they were throwing the ball or trying to run it, Philadelphia was on it. So were you too upset, or excuse me, were you not as upset with the play calling because of those circumstances, or do you feel like there should be some criticism for how the game was called a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to have some criticism, and and I think I still don't understand the running back usage. I mean, I just don't know why Isaiah Pacheco was starting the game. I mean, Kareem's the guy that I think that you want in that spot, and and you need him to just take the bulk of the carries. And then you look at, I think that the Chiefs on their first 10, 11 plays, they had 9 passes. I think they had a sack in there and and only 1 run. I don't get that at all. I mean, I understand that, when you start to fall behind that you abandon the run to go to the pass, but they abandoned the run basically on the first drive. And that seems like an overreaction. And maybe it just goes back to the confidence that this team feels like that they can throw the football. And I certainly felt like that there was a lot of confidence in this team that they felt like that they could move the ball on the Eagles. Clearly they couldn't. And I think that once again they just got out physical. They got outworked. There's no doubt about it. So maybe the game plan wouldn't have mattered in a situation like that because the Eagles just beat them up. But I do wonder about the play calling because it did feel like it just tilted toward the pass way too early. And once you do that, I think that helped kind of create the hole that they had.
Now that we're gearing up for the offseason, there's going to be a lot of questions for this football team, but one of the main ones will be around Travis Kelce. Will he be coming back to Kansas City to play another year? It seemed like it on Radio Row and leading up to this game, there was no signs that he's wanting to step away, but who knows? Who knows what's going on inside his mind right now? What's your expectation? Maybe what's your pick come St. Joe time where we're talking about this team again in training camp? Will Travis Kelce be there, or do you feel like that was the last game we just saw him play in the NFL?
No, I don't think it is the last game that we're going to see from Travis Kelce. This dude loves ball, and even when he was asked this week on, I think, Monday night, about where he sees himself in 3 years, he said hopefully he's still playing football. He said he wants to play until the wheels fall off. The wheels haven't fallen off at this point. I do think that the Chiefs need to reconsider how they use him and that Travis needs to accept his age and realize that he can't play as many snaps as he used to. He played more snaps this season than I believe he had in the last 4 or 5 years. That's ridiculous at age 35. I mean, once again, that goes back to some of the decisions that this team made, and I get that there was a poor part of the season where he was the only guy that they had. But at the same time, the more that Travis plays, you're continuing to, degrade the development of a Noah Gray. You need to find out what you have there. You've got other guys, and they leaned pretty heavy on those multiple tight end sets, when they were struggling this year. So I kind of get why they went to Travis, but I think it piled up because he looked pretty worn out tonight. He looked beat up, and and probably some of that was a little bit of what the Eagles did to him. But even with getting 2 weeks off, this may have been just a long season for Travis. And if I'm Andy Reid, Travis Kelce comes to me and says, "Hey, Coach, I'm thinking about walking away." If I'm Andy Reid, I say, "Tell you what, come back in July and tell me how you feel." because I think at some point along the way that Travis would realize that he's going to miss this game too much, and he wants to get every bit out of it that he can.
Last couple of questions for you here, Matt. Really appreciate your time. You talk about Saquon Barkley and how the Chiefs slowed him down. He averaged less than 3 yards per carry. And then on the offensive side of things, even as bad as it was for basically 3 quarters, Xavier Worthy finishes with 2 touchdowns and 158 yards. So my question, Matt, is if I were to tell you, without looking at the score, that Saquon Barkley would have that total and Worthy would have that total, what would you think the score would be in a game like that where those two guys have complete opposite stat lines?
Oh, I think the Chiefs won 40-22. I mean, that's just, when they shut down Saquon Barkley the way that they did, you absolutely would think that the Chiefs would have won this game. And with Xavier Worthy, I mean, there was a fair amount of garbage points. I mean, it was a lot in the second half, and then the late touchdowns. But if you told me those were the numbers, absolutely, the Chiefs just run away. I mean, I think there's some positives in it though, because Xavier Worthy having that kind of performance, it's got to give you a lot of confidence for next year about what kind of a player that he can be. And if Rashee Rice comes back and is healthy, you can have a couple of really nice pieces there. And hey, Chiefs would love to have Hollywood Brown back. So, there's opportunities for next season for this offense to bounce back, especially because of all the injuries and difficulties that they had this year.
All right, Matt. Well, appreciate your time all season long, being so flexible, giving us great insight every single week. You take care down in New Orleans and get back safely.
I will, and I promise I am not being arrested. That was just one of the teams, I'm sure, going out, or Taylor Swift going back to the hotel. I don't know what, but I'm safe and sound.
All right. Great stuff as always from Matt. He's been phenomenal. Always gives us the best insight right after the game, and so flexible. When we're talking about, he jumps on at midnight, he jumps on in an afternoon game, maybe a noon kickoff. He's always been very flexible and moving around for us, which we, of course, really appreciate it, because this will be our last show of the year, because that was the final NFL game of the year until September. So as Dylan said, a diehard football fan, he's going to have to wait a little bit. We're all going to have to wait a little bit until the next time we see the Chiefs play football. So that was Matt Derrick, our guy, ChiefsDigest.com, and he's brought to you by Cap One Lending. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have our locker room report, hear from those 3 guys, DeAndre Hopkins, Travis Kelce, and Xavier Worthy. They're coming up on the Red and Gold Postgame Show on Sports Radio 810 WHB. football season with Bodabox, the ultimate tailgate wine. Bodabox is the premium boxed wine that wins with wine critics. Bodabox, this is how we Boda. Please drink responsibly. Sponsored by Bodabox Vineyards, Manteca, California. It's now time for our locker room report, which is brought to you by Twin Peaks. 3 players that we are going to hear from, starting with Travis Kelce. Asked Matt Derrick if he feels like that was it for Travis Kelce, even if they won tonight, which they never really had the opportunity to do once they fell behind by 3 scores, it felt like. But doesn't feel like Travis Kelce is going to end his career on that. He did look a little bit tired. He did look a little bit banged up, even though they had a week of rest. But this is a 35-year-old going to be 36. Still football left to be played in his career. And as Matt said, what Travis reiterated, I want to play until the wheels fall off. And clearly after this year, the wheels have not fallen off. But here was Travis Kelce after the 40-22 loss to the Philadelphia Eagles.
What was the difference in the game?
Couldn't get it going offensively. I mean, they just got after us on all 3 phases, and then on top of that, turnovers, penalties, playing behind the sticks on offense, just drop passes, not taking advantage of, the play call and executing. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. You don't lose like that without everything going back. So.
Travis, what's most shocking about this? What's most shocking about this type of loss?
That we haven't played that bad all year.
Did they do anything that surprised you guys at all or cut you off?
Normally you guys can turn it around.
I know you talked about that before in these games where try to keep everyone going on the sidelines. Is it difficult today?
I mean, just couldn't find that spark, couldn't find that momentum.
Is there a point at which you kind of were going through the game? So many times you guys have been able to turn it around, Travis. Is there a point where you just, knew that today you weren't going to be able to find that plug?
I mean, this team is going to fight till the end forever, and you saw that even with the score late. We're always going to fight.
Travis, I feel like the guys over there kind of found the guys you wanted to talk to. What was your message to them?
Congratulations.
I feel like at halftime it was totally within reach.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, never lose doubt, never lose faith, in, especially at half.
When the team doesn't have to blitz, Travis, and they can just keep 7 back, just how difficult is that to sort of run your concepts the way you want when the other team's getting pressure with 4 just about every time?
I think there was a lot of things going wrong. Can't just say that it was just the O-line or anything like that. I think it was accumulated of everything, not really going our way today.
What was Coach's message to you guys afterwards?
This one's going to hurt. Let it hurt and figure out how to get better recovery. Have a go, guys.
All right, that was Travis Kelce after the game. Clearly dejected in this one, but I do agree with Matt Derrick. I think he will be back next year, and I think that he might even have a couple more years in playing in the NFL and playing in Kansas City. Disappointing tonight. Wasn't really much of a factor. Had a big drop on the first offensive series of the game. It was all downhill after that. Had a couple of catches late in the game in garbage time, but I'm sure Travis Kelce, as he ended that interview with, saying it's going to sting for a while. And when you lose in the Super Bowl and you lose like that, it absolutely should sting for a while. Now let's hear from the one guy offensively that did have a very good performance in Xavier Worthy. He did get the majority of his totals in the garbage time when they were down by 4+ scores, but Worthy still took the podium after the game. That was a career night for him. Hell of a time to have it in the Super Bowl, but I think he would much rather just have the win and less yards and touchdowns if he could be helping hoist the trophy tonight, but that is not the case. Here is Worthy after the loss to the Eagles.
Man, the D-line just had immense pressure. They played really good up front, played really good in the back end. Just couldn't figure it out.
Anything that they did surprise you offensively, your teammates, and everyone?
We knew they had a good D-line coming into the game. It was more of just executing and just going out there and playing with confidence. Man, like you said, rookie year, this might be a passionate question, but I just want to thank the guys in my room. This might be my last time playing with them. Some of them might be his last game. Trades happen, so want to thank the guys. They really helped me out a lot, just with my development as a man and as a player in this league. Just the knowledge they gave me to learn and keep building my rookie year. I just really appreciate them for that.
Xavier, you get 2 touchdowns in the Super Bowl as a rookie, which is a fantastic achievement. Before it to come in a game like tonight where you guys don't come through, is it a bit bittersweet or how do you describe it?
Man, it's happened in the 60-minute game, man. As long as it happened, I mean, just going out there and putting my best foot forward. No matter the score, just going out there. The score's blank at the end of the day. Just go out there and just keep trying to put my best foot forward.
Xavier, what does it say about your development that you were able to get to this point to perform as you did tonight?
Like I said, I got to give all credit to my guys in the room, even Trav and Pat for believing me, just putting the balls up there and throwing them to help me and just trust me to go out there and make the play.
What can you learn from tonight? I mean, 2 touchdowns, the offensive effort. What can you learn personally from a night like tonight?
Just carry this into training camp. I feel like we're going to be back. Just use this as field to build just more. How do I say it? I'm out of words right now. I'm not even gonna lie. It's just to build on next season, to get better. Use this as motivation. Then come harder next year.
Is there any sort of shock value, surprise that was going the way it was going with the 24-0
I mean, of course, nobody expected it to come out and be 24-0, but I mean, we fought at the end of the day. We just got to be better.
What was Coach Reid's message for your team in the locker room at halftime?
Coach Reid really didn't say too much. It was really crisp, like he said. I just delivered the message. He said, go out there and use this as field. Training camp, come back 10 times more in shape, 10 times better, 10 times stronger. So just going to use this as field. Yeah, we definitely started slow.
What did they do to get the offense out of rhythm?
They just came out. They were the better team today. They came out juiced, and we came out flat.
Do you have some draw plays or screen something to slow them down, slow that pass rush down?
I don't know.
All right, thanks, Xavier.
And that was Xavier Worthy after the game tonight. Again, a career performance. It would have certainly been better off if a lot of those totals came in the first half, but Chiefs offense couldn't get anything going in the first 3 quarters of this one. And by then, it was too late. So you do look at the box score. It was a great game for Xavier Worthy, but he's already focused on next year. He's focused on training camp, coming into camp in 10 times better shape, as he pointed out. And lastly, maybe it was the final time that we'll see DeAndre Hopkins in a Chiefs uniform. Going to be 34 years old next year. The Chiefs will be bringing back some wide receivers, younger ones than him. Rashee Rice, probably the most notable. But he did take the podium after the game, definitely said some things that caught fire on social media. But here was DeAndre Hopkins after the loss to Philadelphia in the Super Bowl.
Oh, man, it's a loss. I feel the same after every loss, but obviously this one has a little bit more meaning. Super Bowl, I feel bad, man.
Can you talk about what it meant to you to get to wear your dad's jacket?
It meant a lot.
Most of us have never seen Patrick Mahomes have a game like that, especially in the playoffs. What was he like in the huddle on the sidelines during that?
He's human, so I think you guys see that he's human. They made, they converted off our mistakes. And so, he's a human being, man, and I guess the world got to see that.
How much were you taken aback just at the extent of the loss?
Loss is a loss. It says W or L at the end of the day. Those guys beat us. So, man, tough loss. It's my first year being with the Chiefs, and, I saw a lot of things in the media about the refs, but obviously, what y'all gonna say now about the refs and us when there was a lot of touchy calls? Are y'all gonna report that? Are y'all gonna talk about the refs now? Chabella.
All right. That was DeAndre Hopkins, and if that was the final press conference he had with Kansas City, what a way to go out. Clearly still a little bit emotional after the game, but a couple of things he did say had some power behind it. He had a point with a couple of the things he was saying. But that was DeAndre Hopkins there. You heard from Kelsey, Worthy, and Hopkins. You missed any of it, you can always check it out on the podcast page after the show. And that's been the Locker Room Report, brought to you by Twin Peaks.
The Chiefs Locker Room Report is brought to you by Twin Peaks. No one does football like Twin Peaks. Whatever your preference, they have everything from tequila cocktails and an extensive bourbon category to top shelf spirits and cocktails served over ice balls. Local craft beers and handcrafted whiskey cocktails round out an adventurous drink menu, second to none. And don't forget about their 29-degree man-sized drafts at Twin Peaks.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue to roll on the Red and Gold postgame show on Sports Radio 810 WHB. This is How We Boda. Please drink responsibly. Sponsored by Boda Box Vineyards, Manteca, California. Well, the Chiefs fall tonight, 40-22, as you know by now. The three-peat will not happen, at least with this era of Chiefs players. And, I do wonder, now as they'll head into this offseason, with the three-peat talk gone, they'll certainly have a target on their back going into training camp. They're always going to have a target on their back with Patrick Mahomes as the quarterback. But you do wonder, since this entire year was focused, zeroed in on the three-peat, the talk of the three-peat, that now you can almost exhale a little bit. It's going to take a long time to recover from this loss. It's going to sting for a little bit. We all know that, whether it be a player, whether it be a coach, whether it be a fan. But now you go into the offseason, need to restructure a few things. Some guys are going to walk. Some guys you're going to have back. But going into training camp, you are not the reigning champs. The Eagles will now have that pressure of, we won the Super Bowl. People are going to expect us to run it back. People are going to expect us to be the top dog in the NFC. It's pressure that not many teams can live up to. The Chiefs were able to do that not once, not twice, but almost 3 times. And I can go back to the first show we did here on the Red and Gold Postgame Show. We were talking about the three-peat, what it was going to take, what pieces they needed, and throughout the season, going over the injuries, going over Patrick Mahomes' sluggish play when I was out, watching them in San Francisco, or I guess technically Santa Clara, when they beat the Niners, like slowly but surely improving that team. I remember coming on here and talking about the Buffalo game after they had lost in Orchard Park and where they were at that point, and if they went back to Buffalo in the postseason, were they actually going to be able to win that time around? And then they face off, but at Arrowhead Stadium, they win that one to keep the three-peat alive. But almost every single show, it was about the three-peat. And could they be the team of destiny? Could they be the team that finally makes history? And that ends tonight. And I don't think it's a stretch to say that that's probably not going to happen and may not ever happen because of how difficult it is to win one Super Bowl. Just ask some of the rivals of the Chiefs, some that are still looking for that first Super Bowl in their franchise's existence. Ask Chiefs fans that grew up in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and all the way into the 2000s, not winning a Super Bowl. It's really hard to do what the Chiefs have done so far. And even though it stings and it burns right now, let time pass a little bit, and then you'll be able to truly appreciate how unbelievable that run was. And though it does feel unsatisfying that they aren't able to separate themselves from some of those other dynasties that did go back-to-back, they can a little bit because they were the only team to get to the Super Bowl and have that opportunity. It's just unfortunate if you are a Chiefs fan that that opportunity was squandered rather quickly. I mean, if this game was closer, maybe you'd be more heartbroken. Maybe you'd feel better about it because they really were damn close to winning 3 consecutive Super Bowls. It is nearly impossible to do. So the reason I say it's, not a stretch to say that probably won't happen again. Because you got to focus on getting back there. You got to focus on getting that first and then a second and then playing well enough in that third year to give yourself the opportunity. But a three-peat almost feels video game-like. In fact, if you play on a hard difficulty in college football or Madden, it's hard to win 3 championships in a row. What they've been able to do in the Mahomes era is just jaw-dropping. I think that's been one of the terms we've used multiple times tonight, more so in a negative light, of jaw-dropping in the way this game transpired. But for the Mahomes era, they make everybody just go crazy. Whether you're rooting for them or you're rooting against them, they've become one of the most watched sports teams, sports franchises right now, among all sports too. People want to tune in. People want to know if they're going to win or they're going to lose. They want to root for them. They want to root against them. And tonight, a lot of eyeballs on the Super Bowl. So, yeah, it stings when you get your ass kicked like that. But they've laid this foundation and have lived up to a lot of that hype. Now, to have 2 Super Bowl losses doesn't feel too good. You've also won 3. You've been to 5 in 6 years. There's going to be a lot of teams that never do that, never are that fortunate. And the Chiefs have had to go through some really good teams to get that done. Had to beat some really good teams in the AFC title game and the Super Bowl, and that was the case this season. It just didn't end up in another Super Bowl victory. 40-22, the final in New Orleans, Philadelphia. Now will be the reigning champs going into the 2025-2026 season. Okay, we're going to take our final break here on the Red and Gold postgame show. When we come back, we will wrap it all up right here on Sports Radio 810 WHB. By Westlake Ace Hardware. Westlake Commercial, a division of Westlake Ace Hardware, is your local business-to-business supply partner. Our commercial team, dedicated business-to-business website, credit terms, and convenience store locations make it easy. Visit your local Westlake Ace Hardware store or www.westlakehardware.com/commercial today. History was not made in New Orleans tonight. The Chiefs get thumped by the Philadelphia Eagles. We will have a full week of talk about this game, and maybe not all of it will be doom and gloom. We'll need to, welcome in the pain that this is going to feel like over the next few days. You'll have Stephen St. John talking about it here in about 6 hours. Then you'll have Jason Anderson, Dylan Michaels, Sterling Holmes on the zone, and then you're going to have Seren Petro, Curtis Ebold, Adam Dravetta, Kyle Collier on the program talking about it. But a full week here at Sports Radio 810 WHB talking about the final game of the season for the Chiefs. Didn't go their way, but what's next for Kansas City? And for us, we'll see what happens moving forward in the offseason, how much we talk about the Chiefs here on 810 WHB. But good night, Kansas City. Glad you listened all season long.